Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something pretty fascinating, the art of thinking differently.
Yeah, and we've got some great material to work with today.
A podcast episode and even a discussion script, both focused on, well, how to think differently. Think of it as like a toolkit for rewiring your brain for more creativity.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that both sources emphasize thinking differently as a key ingredient.
Great.
Well, not just for groundbreaking innovations, but for personal growth too. It's not about being different just to stand out, but about tapping into, a whole wellspring of creative solutions.
Approaching challenges from a different angle, I like that. So thinking differently can lead to some amazing things. Why aren't we all doing it already? What holds us back?
Well, the sources point out some, I guess you could say, roadblocks.
Roadblocks.
Yeah, fear of failure. That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
Hesitating to try new things because of worrying about looking silly or making mistakes. And then there's that pressure to conform, to fit in.
Right. Nobody wants to be the odd one out.
Exactly. And then on top of that, we've got our own cognitive biases to deal with. Think of them as mental shortcuts.
Mental shortcuts.
Yeah, that our brains use to, process information quickly, helpful in a lot of situations, but they can lead to blind spots. It's like they limit our ability to think objectively.
Okay, cognitive biases. I've heard that term, but it always sounds so technical. Can you give an example of how these biases, actually affect us in real life?
Absolutely. Let's take confirmation bias. Have you ever noticed how you tend to, gravitate towards news sources that align with your existing beliefs?
Oh, yeah. Guilty as charged. It's easy to get stuck in an echo chamber, isn't it?
Exactly. That's confirmation bias at work. Seeking out information that just confirms what we already believe, even if it's not the full picture.
So how do we break free from these mental shortcuts and start thinking more objectively?
Well, the sources emphasize curiosity and continuous learning, constantly seeking out new information, perspectives, and experiences that challenge our assumptions.
It's about getting out of our comfort zones, right?
Precisely. It's about being open to new ideas, even if they seem a little strange at first. Remember, the most groundbreaking innovations, they often come from connecting seemingly unrelated dots.
That reminds me of this time I decided to learn pottery.
Pottery?
Yeah, no, that sounds random, right?
Totally. Tell me more.
Well, I've always been more of a, left-brained, analytical thinker. Art really wasn't my thing.
Uh-huh.
But I thought, why not?
Challenge yourself.
Exactly. Big time.
Yeah.
I was terrified of making a fool of myself, but I signed up for a class anyway. And you know what? It ended up being one of the most rewarding experiences. It wasn't just about learning to make a hopefully symmetrical pot, but the whole process, getting my hands dirty, experimenting, realizing that making mistakes wasn't the end of the world.
Sounds like you stumbled upon one of the key principles of thinking differently, right? Embracing failure as an opportunity to grow.
Absolutely. And, pottery, it forced me to think in 3 dimensions, totally different from my usual way of thinking. It even started to influence how I approached problems at work. It's amazing how seemingly unrelated experiences can spark new insights.
It's the power of exposing ourselves to different fields and disciplines. It helps us break free from, I guess you could say, rigid mental patterns. It helps us discover new ways of seeing the world.
So we've talked about why thinking differently is important, some of the things that hold us back, the power of, curiosity and new experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But are there specific techniques we can use to, actually cultivate a thinking differently mindset?
Absolutely. The sources offer some very practical tools, things like mind mapping, role-playing, and good old brainstorming.
Okay, those sound familiar. Anything a little more, out of the box?
Well, they also highlight something called analogical thinking.
Analogical thinking.
Yeah, it might sound intimidating, but it's a pretty simple concept. It's about finding connections and drawing parallels between things that seem totally unrelated.
Give me an example. How does that work in real life?
Think about Velcro.
Velcro.
Yeah. The inventor, George de Mestral, got the idea by observing how burrs clung to his dog's fur. He took inspiration from nature and applied it to a completely different field. Revolutionized fastener technology.
Wow, that's a great example. So it's about spotting patterns and connections that others might miss.
Exactly. It's about asking, what if? And applying knowledge from one domain to another in creative ways. It's like looking at the world through a kaleidoscope. Suddenly, everything has the potential to be connected in a new and interesting way.
That's a great way to put it. So we can cultivate this thinking differently mindset by, feeding our curiosity, embracing new experiences, and even borrowing ideas from unexpected places. But what about when we're working with others? How do we create environments where this kind of thinking can thrive?
That's a great question. The sources emphasize the role of collaboration in fostering a culture of innovation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Bouncing ideas off each other, getting different perspectives, working together to solve problems.
Exactly. It's about creating environments where diverse voices are heard, where experimentation is encouraged, and where people feel safe to share their ideas without fear of judgment.
That sounds ideal, but I'm sure there are potential downsides to this whole thinking differently thing, right? Is it always good to go against the grain?
You're right, and the sources do acknowledge that. While thinking differently is incredibly valuable, it's equally important to avoid becoming dogmatic.
Dogmatic.
Yeah, or dismissive of other viewpoints.
It's about striking a balance.
Absolutely. Being open to new ideas, but also willing to listen and learn from others.
Being open to feedback, willing to change course when needed.
And remembering that even the most brilliant ideas can be improved through collaboration.
And sometimes the best idea, well, it might be the one that's already out there, tried and true.
Exactly. It's not about reinventing the wheel for the sake of it. It's about, being open to all possibilities and choosing the best approach for the situation. Sometimes the most effective solution is a blend of the new and the familiar.
Speaking of blending the new and the familiar, this reminds me of a time when let's just say it was a classic case of good intentions gone wrong. A few years back, I got really into this idea of gamifying everything.
Gamifying everything.
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. A surefire way to boost motivation and engagement.
Okay, I can see the appeal.
Right. So I decided to apply this to our team's project management system. Created these elaborate point systems, leaderboards, even virtual badges for completing tasks. I thought I was a genius.
And how did that go?
Not well.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It turns out my teammates weren't as thrilled about spending their days battling virtual dragons and collecting imaginary treasure as I was.
They weren't?
Nope. They found it distracting, confusing, and frankly, a bit childish.
Ouch. Sounds like you might have overdone it a bit.
Big time.
Yeah.
I was so caught up in my brilliant idea that I totally failed to consider the practical implications, and more importantly, how my team would actually feel about it.
It's a good reminder that even the most unconventional ideas need to be grounded in reality and tested and refined with input from others.
Lesson learned. Now, whenever I get a revolutionary idea, I make sure to run it by my team first.
That's a great approach. It's a good reminder that thinking differently isn't about becoming a lone wolf. It's about collaboration, feedback, and finding that balance between innovation and practicality.
So true. And that's a great place to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot, but there's still so much more to explore.
Stay tuned, because next time we'll dive even deeper into techniques for thinking differently and how to create a culture of innovation in your own life.
We'll be back soon, so don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the deep dive. Before the break, we were talking about how to build a culture of innovation, not just at work, but in our everyday lives too.
Right, and one of the big takeaways from our sources is that it all starts with diversity.
Diversity.
Yeah, and I don't just mean demographics. It's about diversity of thought, different perspectives.
Making sure everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas.
Exactly. Creating a space where no matter your background, your experience, you feel like you can contribute. It's about psychological safety, where you're not afraid to speak your mind, challenge assumptions, even propose those out there ideas.
Without fear of judgment, right?
Exactly. Think about it. Would you be more willing to share a bold idea in a meeting where you knew your perspective was valued? Or one where you felt like you had to play it safe, avoid any criticism?
Definitely the first one.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to feel like they'll be ridiculed for thinking differently.
And our sources really emphasize open communication as crucial to creating that kind of environment.
Open communication.
Yeah. Breaking down silos, encouraging honest conversations, making sure there are ways for people to give feedback and actually collaborate.
So it's about moving away from that, top-down, rigid approach to decision-making.
Totally. Embracing a model that's more collaborative, where everyone have a voice. And that ties into another important element: experimentation.
Experimentation.
Encouraging people to try new things, embracing those, inevitable failures as opportunities to learn, building a culture of, continuous improvement.
Shifting from a fear of failure to a growth mindset.
Exactly. Seeing mistakes as valuable feedback. And that goes for organizations, but also for each of us individually. How can we apply these principles, even if our work environment isn't perfect?
That's a good question. I think For me, it's about consciously seeking out those different viewpoints, reading something that challenges my own assumptions, or talking to someone with completely different life experiences.
And remember, being open to new experiences goes beyond reading a book or watching a documentary. It could be a new hobby, traveling, or even just starting a conversation with someone you wouldn't normally talk to.
It's about being a lifelong learner.
Absolutely. Constantly expanding your horizons.
Never stop asking why.
Dig deeper.
Get below the surface.
And be comfortable with the fact that there isn't always one right answer.
Embrace the ambiguity.
The uncertainty.
The fact that the world is complex and constantly changing.
And, most importantly, be kind to yourself when you make mistakes.
Mistakes. Oh, yeah, speaking of mistakes, I can't help but think back to that story we talked about earlier. The one about the gamification experiment?
Ah, yes, the gamification fiasco.
It shows how, even with good intentions, trying to shake things up can backfire.
It's a good reminder that we need to balance innovation with practicality and consider the people we're working with.
Thinking differently, it's not about being contrary just for the sake of it.
It's about finding better solutions, creating positive change.
Making the world, well, a more interesting and fulfilling place.
And sometimes that means sticking with what works, even if it's not the most, unconventional approach.
Right. The key is to be adaptable, having a variety of thinking strategies, knowing when to use which one.
And never stop learning and growing.
The world is constantly changing.
And the ability to think differently, well, that's only going to become more valuable.
So as we move towards wrapping up, I think it's worth repeating something our sources emphasized. Thinking differently. It's a skill. Like any skill, you can learn it.
You can practice it.
You can develop it over time.
It's not some magical talent that some people are born with.
It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
By choosing to challenge your assumptions, embracing new experiences.
Cultivating a mindset of curiosity and growth. And that's something we can all do.
Absolutely. No matter your background, your education, your job.
We all have the potential to be innovative thinkers.
You just got to tap into it.
And put in the effort to nurture it. So for everyone out there who's feeling inspired to shake things up, embrace a new way of thinking. Start small.
Pick one of the techniques we discussed.
Mind mapping, role-playing, analogical thinking. Give it a try.
You might be surprised by the insights you uncover.
The creative solutions you come up with.
And don't be afraid to fail.
Failure is just an opportunity to learn and grow.
The more you experiment, the more comfortable you'll become stepping outside your comfort zone.
Embracing the unknown. Welcome back, everyone. We're at the final stretch of our deep dive into thinking differently.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've explored so much, from the amazing benefits to, well, those pesky roadblocks that get in the way.
And we even dove into some practical techniques for boosting creativity and fostering innovation, both personally and on a larger scale.
Right, looking at how we can build those environments where thinking differently can really flourish. But before we wrap up completely, there's something from our source material that I keep coming back to.
What's that?
This idea of thinking authentically.
Oh, yeah. That really stuck with me, too.
It's not just about trying to be different for the sake of it,
Right.
It's about finding that way of thinking that truly aligns with you, your values, your passions, your unique perspective on the world.
Like finding your own voice and letting it guide you.
Exactly. And that might mean challenging the status quo, or maybe it means finding new and innovative ways to work within the systems we already have. It's about staying true to yourself, letting that authenticity shape your thoughts and actions.
I love that. It's like finding that sweet spot where your passions and strengths, they perfectly meet the needs of the world around you.
And I think that's where real innovation and impact come from, when we bring our whole selves to the table and let our unique perspectives shape how we approach challenges and opportunities.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the biggest takeaway for everyone listening is that thinking differently, it's within everyone's reach.
It really is. It's not some magical ability that only certain people have.
It's a skill you can learn, you can practice, you can develop over time.
Just like any other skill, right?
And the more we embrace this way of thinking, the more we unlock a world of possibilities in our own lives, our work, our communities, everywhere.
We become better problem solvers, more innovative in our thinking, and more engaged with the world around us.
So here's one final thought-provoking question for everyone to ponder as we finish up. What's one assumption you hold that you could challenge today?
What's one thing you've always done a certain way but could try approaching differently?
We challenge you to embrace the discomfort of the unknown, step outside your comfort zone, and see where this new way of thinking might lead you.
You might be amazed at what you discover.
New insights, unexpected connections, even a chance to make a real difference in the world.
And that's what it's all about, right?
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into thinking differently.
Until next time, keep those minds open and curious.